Hello and welcome. My name is Nathan Bennett, and I'm an independent consultant and chair of the People in the Ocean Specialist Group for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. The talk that I'm going to present to you now is titled Blue Growth and Blue Justice: 10 Risks and Solutions for the Ocean Economy. It is based on a paper that I and several co-authors recently published under the same title. The paper was a collaboration between myself, Jessica Blythe of Brock University, Carole White of University of East Anglia, and Cecilia Campero of the University of British Columbia. In this paper, we review existing literature to highlight 10 social injustices that might be produced by blue growth, and then explore how they might be avoided to achieve blue justice for coastal communities and small-scale fishers. As we all know, the idea of the blue economy has been receiving quite a bit of attention in recent years in global and national policy discussion. The reason is that the oceans are increasingly viewed as a new frontier for economic development. Indeed, many national governments and corporate actors are promoting a blue growth agenda. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development suggests that ocean industries are the solution to a slowing global economy and projects that their contributions could double from 1.5 trillion in 2010 to 3 trillion in 2030. And while the blue economy is a term that is often used as a shorthand for all forms of economic development in the oceans, the original vision for a blue economy put forward by the small island developing states was for a form of ocean development that was both equitable and sustainable. Yet as companies and governments race to capitalize on marine resources, blue growth can pose substantial risks for both people and the environment. The dominant discourse that frames blue growth as beneficial for the economy, for developing nations, and for coastal communities risks downplaying the uneven distribution of potential benefits as well as harms. Of course, blue growth is often happening in areas of the marine and coastal environment that are used, relied on, and lived in by coastal peoples. There are an estimated 600 million people living on the coast, including 12 to 14 million small-scale fisheries and 260 million jobs in the fisheries sector, as well as 775 million people worldwide who have a high dependence on the oceans. Of course, claims to marine space and resources are based on much more than use and benefits. We must also consider rights, tenure, adjacencies, security, and cultural connections of nations, small-scale fishers, indigenous people, and coastal communities. And because the seas are peopled and they have this high dependence, it is necessary to understand and integrate a broad suite of human dimensions into decision-making related to the ocean economy. This can help us to avoid the potential social harms of the blue economy and instead maximize social benefits. Thus, many would argue for the constructive application of the marine social sciences. The marine social sciences include a diverse and well-established set of disciplines, methods, tools, and theories that can be applied to rigorously study the human dimensions of ocean and coastal issues and challenges. For example, the marine social sciences might provide important insights to guide ocean development through characterizing and evaluating the efficacy of governance and management. They might help to document the social context to inform planning and management. They might assess the impacts of development impacts on human well-being and coastal communities. Or they might be applied to identify the social and institutional factors that influence people's behaviors, actions, and responses. But is a constructive approach sufficient to understand and address justice issues in the ocean economy? A constructive approach to applying social science to the ocean economy might not adequately address the influence of power in politics, or issues related to scale and history, or to identify environmental and social injustices. This lack of attention to the broader political economy of blue growth might fail to question underlying structural issues and thus result in solutions that simply reinforce the status quo. We argue that engaging directly with the critique, and with social justice issues in particular, is fundamental to avoiding the risks and achieving a more just ocean economy. Furthermore, both civil society organizations and academics have been sounding the alarm about emergent issues related to the ocean economy. Many civil society organizations, most notably the World Forum of Fisher People, the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers, and the Transnational Institute, are pushing back against ocean grabbing and blue justice issues that are being perpetrated by blue growth. This is exemplified by this report from a few years back titled The Global Ocean Grab, a Primer, and a paper that I published with several collaborators in 2015, where we defined ocean grabbing as dispossession of or appropriation of use, control, or access to ocean space or resources from prior resource users, rights holders, or inhabitants, through inappropriate governance processes, acts that undermine human security or livelihoods, or impacts that impair social ecological well-being. Muniba Isaacs, researchers from the Too Big to Ignore network, and others from around the world have also been documenting environmental and social injustices occurring as a result of past ocean-based development activities, including industrial fisheries, aquaculture, oil and gas development, and blue carbon markets, and have issued calls for greater attention to blue justice. This increasing attention to ocean grabbing and blue justice can be seen as part of an ongoing critique of the restructuring of rules and authority over the access, use, and management of marine resources and areas of the ocean. Yet in our view, the risks of social and environmental injustices from blue growth are still insufficiently recognized by those advocating for substantial increases to ocean development activities. Thus, we explored past injustices produced by ocean-based economic development through a qualitative review of the literature. The central question guiding our inquiry was, what social injustices can result from the ocean economy? We used a qualitative or narrative review approach for this research to allow for patterns and themes to emerge from an exploration of the broader literature on a topic. The steps we employed included conducting an initial systematic search of the literature using key terms, then allowing themes related to the central question to emerge through open coding of titles and abstracts, and then finally, we supplemented the narrative review through additional searches of the literature for more empirical examples. In brief, our review highlighted 10 risks or social injustices: dispossession, displacement, and ocean grabbing, environmental justice concerns from pollution and waste, environmental degradation and reduction of availability of ecosystem services, livelihood impacts for small-scale fishers, lost access to marine resources needed for food security and well-being, inequitable distribution of economic benefits, social and cultural impacts of ocean development, marginalization of women, human and indigenous rights abuses, and exclusion from decision-making and governance. Due to the short length of this presentation, I'm not going to go any further into each of these topics here. This is just a teaser for the paper which is published in Marine Policy, if you want to read more. We also published this as an open access working paper under the title of Blue Growth and Blue Justice. It is available online. Also, this paper is not intended just as a critique for critique's sake. Rather, through our critique, we aim to directly highlight the worst-case scenarios and stimulate a rigorous dialogue about how to avoid these types of issues. Thus, in the remainder of my talk, I'm going to focus on solutions to achieve a more just ocean economy. An obvious starting place for a discussion of solutions is to offer the opposite of the 10 social injustices that we have identified in the paper. Following this logic, our review suggests 10 key issues requiring attention to achieve blue justice during blue growth. This includes tenure and access, environmental justice, ecosystem services, small-scale fisheries, food security, economic benefits, socio-cultural impacts, gender equity, human rights, and inclusive governance. The need to address these issues in development is already highlighted in existing international declarations and voluntary agreements. For example, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Rights, the Voluntary Guidelines for Small-Scale Fisheries, among many others. And it's also codified in corporate codes of conduct for corporate social responsibility. Yet most of these high-level agreements and policy documents do not specifically focus on the oceans. Furthermore, there has been insufficient attention to norms of inclusiveness and equity in policy deliberations, documents, and guidance related to the ocean economy. Furthermore, we argue that an explicit social justice framing ought to guide decision-making processes related to the ocean economy. The literature on social justice, environmental justice, just transitions, and just transformations defines 3 dimensions: recognitional justice, procedural justice, and distributional justice. The three dimensions of justice can be defined as follows. Recognitional justice refers to the acknowledgement of and respect for pre-existing governance arrangements, as well as the distinct rights, worldviews, knowledge, needs, livelihoods, histories, and cultures of different groups and decisions. Procedural justice refers to the level of participation and inclusiveness of decision-making and the quality of governance processes. And distributional justice can be defined as fairness in the distribution of benefits and harms of decisions and actions to different groups. These three dimensions of justice provide a broad, overarching framework, or a set of key considerations or practical steps that might guide national or international policy deliberations on ocean-based development, or actions to take when planning specific ocean development activities or projects, which could range from renewable energy to fisheries to aquaculture. We expand on these practical steps further in another published paper titled Just Transformations to Sustainability. Finally, transforming the ocean economy to achieve blue justice may not be a simple task, and tinkering at the margins of state or corporate-led economic development may be insufficient. Achieving blue justice may require a substantial change to ocean governance to include new actors and visions, a rethinking of our fundamental assumptions regarding development, a reimagining of novel or alternative models of development, or a paradigm shift regarding the need for growth. A transformation of ocean governance may entail a substantial change in who is involved in decision-making processes in the way that decisions are made. For example, ocean governance requires a greater representation of and influence from small island developing states, civil society organizations, or indigenous peoples organizations. Rethinking our fundamental assumptions regarding ocean-based development would require us to start by asking, why are these injustices occurring, and why do they persist? Responses to these questions may yield challenging answers about unequal global power differentials and resource grabs, neoliberal and capitalist models of governance, and corporate cultures that place profits before people and planet. Imagining new or alternative models of development would require the flipping of this logic to instead place environmental sustainability, planet, and human well-being before corporate profits. Ideas such as regenerative ocean development, community-based blue economies, or community-supported fisheries show some promise. However, scaling these ideas up and out may be challenging. Finally, some authors might go much further and ask whether it is wise to even consider increasing the scale and scope of economic development in the ocean, instead argue for a blue degrowth paradigm. In summary, we review how rapid and unchecked blue growth can produce numerous environmental and social injustices. Through a review and critique of past injustices, our aim is to stimulate a rigorous dialogue on how to achieve a more just and inclusive ocean economy. We conclude that a commitment to blue justice needs to be at the core of the blue growth agenda. It is only through recognizing and addressing past social injustices related to the ocean economy directly that we can hope to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals pledge to leave no one behind. I thank you for your time and for listening. I welcome your questions and look forward to further discussions. Please feel free to contact me at the email listed here or to check out my website.